Holocaust Memorial Day and spoke about the Armenian genocide in 1915 and the real modern-day threat to the 150,000 Armenians who live in Nagorno-Karabakh, or Artsakh as it is known to the Armenians. The day before I was due to speak, the Turkish embassy in London wrote to the mayor of Deby imploring us not to talk about the Armenian genocide. We chose to ignore this request. It was a reminder that this issue is not simply a matter confined to history. At subsequent HMD events, I raised growing concerns about the genocidal intentions of Turkey and Azerbaijan over the people of Artsakh. Unfortunately, these have come to fruition in the last few years. I was inspired to speak out about the plight of the Armenians by our keynote speaker, Suzanna Petrosyan. I first met Suzanna in May 2011 in Stepanakert, Artsakh, the capital city nestled in the mountains of the South Caucasus, a long 6-hour drive from Yerevan, the capital of neighbouring Armenia. She was not only running a local youth charity, but also a senior lecturer in English and philology at Artsakh State University, a business owner and a political activist, and mother of 4 children. I returned several times a year over the following 8 years, where we worked together on a number of projects, writing, photographing, humanitarian youth work. We travelled alone to many remote villages in the dangerous border regions. We appeared on stage together, and we were interviewed several times on TV. Although life was difficult and challenging, Suzanne was positive about the future. This came to a crushing halt on the 27th of September 2020, when Turkey and Azerbaijan started a full-scale war. This changed Suzanna's life forever, her family and that of all the people of Artsakh. Now they no longer have their homeland, ethnically cleansed by Azerbaijan and Turkey, and suffer the indignity of watching from a distance the callous destruction of their culture and their very being. Due to the difficult post-war politics and my status as persona non grata in Azerbaijan, my last visit to Artsakh was in September 2019. The pandemic further frustrated my opportunities for travel, and we didn't see each other for nearly 2 years, finally reuniting in the summer of 2021. And it is with great pleasure that I introduce her in person this evening. Thank you. Suzanna.
What do you think? What question is the most difficult for me to answer? It is, where are you from? Do you know why? Because my country doesn't exist anymore. Every time I hear that question, it feels like an arrow piercing my heart, a pain so deep it's impossible to put into words. That one simple question embodies my past, present, and future, who I am. I'm Armenian from the mountainous land of self-declared Nagorno-Karabakh Republic, or how we call ourselves Artsakh, which has been a historical part of Armenia since the 5th century BC. Armenia, one of the 6 oldest countries in the world, is symbolized by Mount Ararat, the biblical resting place of Noah's Ark. Armenia was the first nation to adopt Christianity. And since then, it has maintained a presence in the Holy Land, with one of Jerusalem's 4 quarters dedicated to Armenians. Armenia became an independent republic in 1991, following the dissolution of the Soviet Union. Artsakh, where my ancestors lived and fought for centuries to protect their heritage, language, faith, and traditions, has been cut from Mother Armenia systematically destroyed over recent decades through wars, massacres, blockade, and forced displacement. The final exodus came in September 2023, when the entire population was forced to leave their homes forever, including my family and me. This ethnic cleansing and cultural genocide of the Armenians in Artsakh was carried out by Azerbaijan with the support of Turkey. The term genocide, coined by Raphael Lemkin, doesn't just refer to the physical extermination of a group, but also the destruction of its cultural, spiritual, and national identity. What happened in Artsakh is a clear example of this. Why this genocide happened? Because the war crimes and genocide of the past towards the Armenian nation have been left unrecognized and unpunished by the international community due to geopolitical interests, such as the Sumgait pogroms in Azerbaijan, the ethnic cleansing and cultural genocide in Nakhichevan, and in particular the Armenian genocide during World War I. The genocide of 1.5 million Armenians, along with the forced Islamization of women and children, deportations, and the destruction of Armenian cultural monuments, remains a painful, unresolved, tragic chapter in our history. The Pope Francis referred to it as the first genocide of the 20th century. The survivors of the Armenian genocide fled from Western Armenia, now Turkey, and spread across the globe, forming a strong and resilient diaspora of about 7 to 10 million people. The diaspora has been crucial in the international recognition of the Armenian genocide, as well as in supporting Armenia and Artsakh through financial aid, political advocacy, and humanitarian efforts. During the 90s war, volunteer units from Armenia and the diaspora joined the fight for Artsakh independence, with many sacrificing their lives in the process. Monte Melkonyan, Avo, an Armenian from California, became a national hero, symbolizing the courage and commitment of the diaspora. Artsakh was considered as a sacred land, a heart and a cradle of the entire Armenian world. His poignant words, "If we lose Artsakh, we will turn the last page of Armenian history," still resonate today. Many scholars see a direct connection between the Armenian genocide and the Holocaust. It is believed that the Nazi Germany, in carrying out its atrocities, drew inspiration from the methods used by the Ottoman Empire. Adolf Hitler in 1939 referenced the Armenian genocide when he declared, "Who, after all, speaks today of the annihilation of the Armenians?" Turkey has never acknowledged the Armenian genocide, and its genocidal policies continue. Last year, President Erdogan suggested that Turkey might enter Israel, just as it had done in Libya and Nagorno-Karabakh. The ethnic cleansing and cultural genocide in Artsakh are interconnected and share similarities with the earlier Armenian genocide a century ago. In both cases, they were systematic efforts to remove Armenians from their homeland and destroy their cultural heritage and national identity. Nationalism and territorial claims play a central role in both cases, as well as denial and lack of accountability. In September 2024, the International Association of Genocide Scholars passed a resolution calling for the international community to recognize the atrocities against Armenians in Artsakh as genocide. The resolution also calls for the protection of Artsakh's right to self-determination. Yet, despite this, the international community, including the United Nations, has largely ignored these appeals. The future of the Armenians of Artsakh remains uncertain, and with ongoing threats from Azerbaijan, Armenia, a small country of just 3 million people, stands at risk of repeating history. Despite solemn pledges of never again, genocides continues to occur, with the international community largely indifferent. The cultural genocide in Artsakh, the Armenian genocide, the Holocaust, the Ukrainian Holodomor, genocides in Rwanda, in Darfur, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and ongoing wars in Gaza, Syria, Ukraine, and many other examples manifest that humanity seems unable to learn from its past mistakes. These horrors stem from a combination of ethnic prejudice, religious hatred, nationalism, and the pursuit of territorial or economic gain. How do we stop future genocides? How do we break this endless cycle of violence? Among the many devastating consequences of war, the psychological toll, particularly on children, is profound. The trauma of war, including post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, anxiety, and anger, leaves scars that last a lifetime. As a survivor of both wars and cultural genocide, I want to share my personal experience and how it has affected my physical and mental health. In 1992, when armed conflict erupted in my country, I was 12 years old. I faced the brutal realities of war. No gas, no electricity, no water, darkness, cold, hunger, fear, bloodshed, tears, mourning, and loss. At 13, I was injured in a rocket attack, but miraculously survived. I remember praying to God, please save me, I don't want to die, I want to marry. I don't know why marriage was so important for me at that moment. When I opened my eyes under the ruins of the house, I couldn't believe I was alive. That moment became a turning point in my life. I saw a light in the darkness, a hope and the mercy of God. I also remember another special day, when the town was bombed from the air. I heard that the local library was on fire. Instead of hiding in the basement with the other kids from our yard, I ran straight towards the flames. When I reached the library, I managed to save a few books. I returned feeling strangely proud of myself. Among the books, one was in Russian, the alphabet of politeness, and the other was in English. I couldn't read a word of it, but I saw the image of the Queen of England on the cover. From that moment, the Queen became a symbol of hope, a fairy tale in my world full of cruelty, and I dreamed to be part of it. Visiting England became the very meaning of my life. The others in the basement laughed at me, calling me insane, but I believed with all my heart that nothing is impossible for God. At 18, my dream came true. I was invited by Baroness Caroline Cox to England to speak at an international peace-building conference at Westminster Palace in London. That visit inspired me to open the first English-speaking club in my country. But there were also countless painful days I wish I could forget, but unfortunately remember always. One of those memories is my experience with bread. I had stood in line for almost 10 hours, feeling very tired and hungry. The smell of freshly baked bread had started to fill the air, and I could feel hope rising inside me. My turn was close. I stretched my hand towards a small window for bread, but just I was about to grab it, the window slammed shut. Sorry, the bread is finished. Come back tomorrow. I felt a wave of helplessness and could barely drag myself back to the basement, empty-handed, exhausted and broken. Every time I smell bread now, the memories come back, and I struggle to hold back my tears. The same hard emotions I associate with eggs, deeply tied to my childhood memories of war. During those years, eggs were a rare and precious commodity. The few eggs we had collected from the chickens at home were always reserved for the men of the family. My grandmother explained that they needed to be well fed to stay strong and protect us. As a child, I dreamed that when I grew up, hopefully in a world free from war, I would become wealthy and eat eggs every day. Now my fridge is always stocked with eggs, just as imagined. But the strange thing is, I can't bring myself to eat them. Every time I look at them, I feel a sense of disappointment, as I still can't quite understand why they seem so precious and desirable in my childhood. Another memory is of a day when me and my father were on our way to the village to get food. The lorry we were in was packed with people, but in the corner I noticed large boxes that looked like coffins. I asked, "What are those?" The answer came quietly: "The bodies of soldiers from the village." I wanted to scream, but as I looked around, I realized that no one else seemed shocked. They were calm, as if death had become an everyday part of their lives. There were also some moments of dark humor. We would often stand for hours to collect water, and during a great missile bombardment, we all lay flat on the ground, covering our heads with our hands, counting to 40. Usually after that, the bombing would stop for a moment. I was terrified, but I was also curious. I wanted to see the rockets, but I was too scared. So I would count them, picking through the caps in my fingers. Or another example, after the war, whenever I saw the moon in the dark sky, I would lie flat on the ground, convinced it was a rocket. Or the sound of a plane flying overhead would send me into a panic, anticipating for an explosion of the bombing. Despite all the pain, over the next 30 years of relative peace, I rebuilt my life. I finished my studies, got married, as I promised to God, had 4 children, and started a university career. I opened my own business, a hotel and restaurant, and also founded a charity, the Artsakh Youth Development Center, with the slogan, "Find Your Future." Over the years, the organization won numerous awards for its work in youth development. I believed in the future, in the power of peace and dialogue to build a strong, secure, and prosperous country. But then life took an unexpected turn. At 6:30 a.m. on September 27, 2020, another war broke out. It shattered my world. In those terrifying moments, I had to flee with my children and elderly father, driving through shelling and airstrikes, terrified we wouldn't survive. It felt like a nightmare, as if every minute could be our last. After 44 days of war, Russian peacekeepers entered our territory, and we naively believed they had come to protect us. But in hindsight, they were simply a Trojan horse. The worst was still ahead. When my son returned from the war, he expected me to celebrate, but instead he found me in tears. He asked me what was wrong. I told him I was crying for all the mothers who would never see their sons again, many of whom I knew personally. It's not just about us who survived, it's about those whose lives were stolen unfairly, and the solidarity we must have with their families. September 2023 marked the end of my entire history. My country was occupied, all the people driven away from their homes, never to return. I no longer had a homeland. I became stateless and homeless. Is it possible mentally to accept such an expected turn? Can you imagine the immense effort that went into rebuilding a country from the ashes of war, only to see it destroyed once again? How many young lives were lost and their cemeteries would be left abandoned? How many were left disabled? How many were still missing or kept as hostages in prisons? The national symbol of my country was "We are our mountains," or Grandma Grandpa, signifying our deep roots in the land and our reverence for the traditions of our ancestors. But now, after being uprooted, how can I breathe? It's a feeling of loss, of a broken soul, and the death of hope. I am not dead, but am I alive? Every morning I ask myself that question. Every night I struggle to sleep. I prayed not to dream because in my dreams when I was in my homeland, I didn't want to wake up. Every day I wondered who was living in my house, if they were keeping it tidy and clean, what they had done with my personal belongings. I simply couldn't stop wishing to go home. I feared that my mind would eventually give up and I would go mad. This is the tragedy of cultural genocide. By destroying a people's homeland, they destroy not just their bodies, but their spirits as well. You are alive, but you feel yourself miserable, empty, broken, dead. The pain of displacement, the trauma of war, and the loss of a homeland are wounds that may never fully heal. Yet, as I stand before you today, I am not asking for sympathy, but for recognition. We must acknowledge the genocide that has been perpetrated against my people, and we must stand together in the fight to ensure that such atrocities are never allowed to happen again. The road to healing is long, and the future of the Armenians of Artsakh is uncertain. But as long as we continue to speak out, share our stories, and demand accountability, there remains a gleam of hope that justice will prevail and that one day the memory of our homeland will not be forgotten. Let us remember not just for the sake of the past, but for the future, so that no one else will react the question, "Where are you from?" with such unbearable pain in their hearts. I am immensely grateful to the Holocaust Memorial Day Committee for actively recognizing the Armenian genocide and its events over the last 10 years, and to Deby City Council for its recognition of the Armenian genocide and the independence of Artsakh. Thank you all for being here, for your attention,